What a world! Welcome now to another episode of the Ocho, presented to you in partnership, as always, with SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. My name is RJ Ochoa. You know me, of course, from BTB, and from right here as your humble host on the Ocho. It is Thursday, the third day, March the 14th, 2024. We hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and as mentioned, it is March the 14th. If you write that down, it is 3/14. It is appropriate that we are having this discussion on Pi Day. I don't know if it's National Pi Day or International Pi Day, but nevertheless, happy Pi Day. And of course, I'm talking about the mathematical symbol, not the Dallas Cowboys philosophy when it comes to free agency. First things first, this is a conversation that you can watch on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel and listen to on the Blogging the Boys podcast network. I've mentioned that there are some conversations that we want to make sure both audiences have access to, because we know some of you only subscribe on YouTube, only subscribe on the podcast. That kind of hurts my feelings. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing somewhere, anywhere, preferably every single place. But we are on YouTube. Search for Blogging the Boys. Subscribe to our channel. We are chasing down. We are so close to catching Arrowhead Pride, SB Nation's home for Kansas City Chiefs content, to become the most subscribed to team account across all of the SB Nation universe. You can also subscribe to our podcast network. Obviously, search for Blogging the Boys wherever you get podcasts, Apple devices, Spotify, etc., etc. If you are on Apple, it really helps us out if you leave a rating, you write a review. That goes one step further. If not, don't worry about it. We still love you. If you want to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads, you can do so at RJ Ochoa, or on TikTok at rj.ochoa. I don't know what the deal with that is, but I'm going to keep saying it until I understand, and that might be a very, very long time from now. So it's Pi Day for you. It is the evening of the 13th for me as I sit down to record this. It's actually 8:06 p.m. Central Standard Time at the moment, and we're kind of coming down now as a fan base in this exact moment for me. It's obviously been a minute for you. The Dallas Cowboys got on the board. This is the only graphic or anything banner I have prepared for you if you are a part of the YouTube audience, the visual audience, because there's not a lot to show for what the Dallas Cowboys have done in free agency so far. However, on Wednesday evening, it was reported that the Cowboys are bringing in the former Mike Zimmer linebacker to become the new Mike Zimmer linebacker. The Minnesota Vikings drafted Eric Kendricks in the second round of the 2015 NFL draft, and obviously he played a majority of his career to this point with Mike Zimmer and the Minnesota Vikings. Kendricks, did spend last season with the Los Angeles Chargers. He was a captain for them, very good player for them. He's had a lot of success. He's had a lot of consistent time playing in the NFL. This is a move that we all thought would make sense. This was a very easy to telegraph move about a month ago, a few weeks ago, well before free agency began, because as Dan Quinn has proven to us, a lot of coaches, a lot of coordinators, when they go to new places or whatever the case may be, they like to work with people who they know. Again, Dan Quinn has poached now 3 different members of the Dallas Cowboys. They're now Washington Commanders, and Mike Zimmer finally got somebody to bring with him. And for what it's worth, Dan Quinn did that here with the Cowboys as well. If you recall at the very beginning, Keanu Neal, DeMonte Kazee, obviously Dante Fowler, who he has stuck with once again. But nevertheless, Eric Kendricks. And what made this situation all the more interesting and all the more funny was it was reported bright and early, actually, on Wednesday morning, about 5:15, I think, a.m. Central Standard Time, that Kendricks was going to be signing with the San Francisco 49ers. So over 12 hours later, a change of heart, which is how Adam Schefter put it in his report, Eric Kendricks decided he wanted to play for the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know if the state income tax had to do anything with that, but I imagine it certainly was a plus in choosing America's team over the bad guys. And I think it's important to start there. We're actually going to title this "The Dallas Cowboys Signed Eric Kendricks," because that's good. It is an objectively good thing, right? I don't want to. I think we cannot let this overshadow the way we feel that may be negative, but I also don't think that we should let our negative feelings overshadow what is an objectively positive thing. We have been saying ever since, I wouldn't even say the season ended, ever since Leighton Vander Esch got hurt, that the Cowboys have needed a classic, a tried and true, a real middle linebacker, a real off-ball linebacker to patrol the defense, to patrol Mike Zimmer's defense. You just can't make hay in the NFL with players like Marquise Bell playing linebacker. And that's nothing against Marquise Bell, but I think that's represented well by the fact of what the Green Bay Packers were able to do to the Cowboys. You play out of 12 personnel, you push people around, and all of a sudden you're too small for those problems. And I think what was really frustrating on top of a lot of things throughout the early portion of free agency, because we're now through the third day. The first official day of the league year from a working standpoint, obviously, is over, given that the new league year began at 4 Eastern on Wednesday. And I'm having this conversation with you, recording it, like I said, at 9 Eastern. So it's only been 5 hours in an official capacity. But obviously, the legal tampering window opened on Monday at 12 Eastern. And we saw, speaking of Dan Quinn, we saw him sign Frankie Louvu, and we were very upset about that because we thought that that would be a great target for the Cowboys, obviously, because of their need at the position. And then I think we probably reached our lowest point as a fan base, and I would be very interested to hear if anybody agrees or disagrees. Hit me up on social media or comment on the video down below if you are watching on the YouTube side. We reached our lowest point because on Wednesday evening, it was reported that Dan Quinn's Washington Commanders were going to be signing Bobby Wagner. And there are some carrots that we have chased as Cowboys fans in the past that have played different positions, and time has changed and whatever. But I would put Bobby Wagner in that same camp as Earl Thomas, in that same camp as Jamal Adams. There was a point in time where it felt inevitable that those players were going to play for the Cowboys, and they were connected to the Cowboys. And anytime they changed teams or whatever, it felt, like destiny, and they ultimately never happened. And when the Cowboys finally obviously had Dan Quinn in the fold, year after year, seemingly, it was kind of a tradition for the Cowboys, for all of us to kind of, opine after Bobby Wagner, to have him come in and, just like he had for Dan Quinn with the Seattle Seahawks and the, Legion of Boom days, run the defense. And that never happened. And I do think it's fair to assume, it is still an assumption, to be very clear, it's fair to assume that this personnel matter was probably out of Dan Quinn's hands, because Dan Quinn gets an opportunity to have a bigger say in team construction for the first time since he was the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. And what does he do? He obviously, he goes out and he gets Bobby Wagner. And it could be coincidence. It could be a lot of things. Again, so I don't want to speak in 100% certainty and act like we know things that we don't. But that was very, very frustrating to see as the Dallas Cowboys were continuing to not do anything. And then this Eric Kendricks things happened. And it was awesome because the Cowboys stole him from the 49ers, and that kind of added to the fun of it all. And it is an objectively good thing, like I said, but it doesn't undo all of the damage that has been done. And I don't want to just have the same conversation a million different times, because I've been having it all week long in various capacities, whether you've heard me here in the Blog and the Boys universe, on our roundtable, on the NFC's mixtape, whether you listen to my radio show every morning on San Antonio Sports Star. You can listen, by the way, every weekday from 6 to 10 a.m. Central Time on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star, sasportstar.com. Or if you are a YouTube person, we do have a YouTube channel. You can watch the show live. Just search for SA Sports Star and subscribe there. You can always obviously catch the rewatch if you're not, up that early. Or we do podcast segments between myself and my co-host Rob Thompson on the podcast feed. So you always have access to these sorts of things. We want to make sure you get those. But the conversation has been about how the Cowboys have kind of failed and how they have been such a wallflower. And it really felt, it was so intense. And I say was because they have technically broken the seal, obviously, by landing Eric Kendricks. But, they've brought in one player. Let's not bake a cake or anything quite yet. But it felt so different. And maybe we're just that fed up. Maybe we're just running on emotion. Maybe that's my read and I'm completely wrong. But it did feel different. It still feels different. It felt almost purposeful to prove a point. Like, you think we're going to go all in? Well, why don't you sit back and wait and see? You really think you want to challenge me to say that I said that I was going to go all in? I'm going to show you who's all in. I'm going to show you what's all in. Who do you think you are? I am. I know we just came up on the 10-year anniversary of that, which was great. So it felt kind of spiteful. I mean, again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my read on the situation is wrong. And we did talk about this on the roundtable, how it just, I have a hard time believing that any team in the NFL could do something that literally 31 other teams did the opposite of, and believe that the one is in the right. Now, if the one were Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in our current moment, obviously we're more inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt. If it's old school Tom Brady and Bill Belichick or the New England Patriots, same sort of thing. You get the idea. But for the Dallas Cowboys to act like we are the one, we know something that literally everybody else doesn't, just didn't really pass the smell test. And so to go at this and just, it's not even a matter of being upset about the players that have walked for the Cowboys so far in free agency. And right now they're up to 5. Tony Pollard is a member of the Tennessee Titans, Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biadasz, and Dante Fowler, all members of the Washington Commanders. Meanwhile, a little bit before the Bobby Wagner news broke, we found out that Neville Gallimore was headed to the Miami Dolphins. I don't know if that was before the Bobby Wagner thing, but either way, it was around the same time. So it's not about losing them. I don't think any of us are panicked about that, but it's about not getting in on the action. And nobody, once again, is asking to spend all of the money or be ridiculous or just charge everything on all of the credit cards. But to wait this long, kind of bold. I mean, to wait this long is really, really, really bold. And for no reason, the Cowboys have placed an extreme amount of extra pressure on their draft class to now come in and save them. And so they're going to charge these, players who we don't even know yet with the sins of the past. I use that expression all the time because whoever winds up being the 24th overall pick, that is the person who the Cowboys are putting these incredible expectations on the shoulders of. And that's not fair to do or even practical to do, which is why, once again, we all have such a problem with this. And I want to say this next part of what I'm going to say carefully, because if you follow me or read me or listen to me, if you talk to me at my kitchen table, which would only be my wife and son, who would understand this, that I am somebody who believes in Dak Prescott. That I am somebody who, if I ran the team, I was tweeting a little bit about this on Wednesday, goodness gracious. If it was up to me, I would have signed Dak Prescott a long time ago. I would pay him commensurate with market rate. I understand that there's some of you who disagree with that. That would be my decision if I ran the team. I can acknowledge that you feel differently. Okay, we're good there. That's what I would do. Okay, now, I wrote about this as well this week. People act like, when sometimes somebody will pull an old tweet of somebody and they'll say, this happened to me recently. Somebody pulled an old tweet of mine from like 2022 and tried to gotcha me. And I can be gotcha'd on a lot of things, but you cannot pull something of mine from 2022 and use it as a gotcha, depending on what it is, because that was 2022, right? Like it's been 2 years or a year and a half or whatever, I forget what month it was. Information changes, context changes, and therefore we're allowed to change our opinions on things. I think this is something that is lost on us in a lot of aspects of life. So that being said, I haven't changed how I feel about Dak Prescott, but I have changed a little bit about how I feel about the circumstances that Dak Prescott finds himself in. And more specifically, or I guess more ambiguously on a more macro level, the circumstances have changed in terms of how I view the Dallas Cowboys as a whole. We are past the initial moments of free agency. That is not to say and not to imply and not to assume that the Dallas Cowboys are not capable of still landing legitimate talent that can help them in 2024. That is absolutely still 100% possible. But we all agree that their opportunity to find a significant difference maker has passed them by, right? That opportunity was one of the, we'll call it ancillary benefits of extending Dak Prescott in the here and now, because the purpose in extending Dak Prescott is obviously to have him be a part of your future. But again, a kind of plus to it all was the salary cap relief that it was going to provide in the here and now that would have seemingly theoretically allowed the Cowboys to pursue free agents, to help them, more significant free agents, all due respect to Eric Kendricks and Trent Sieg and whoever else winds up joining the team. So with that opportunity in the rearview mirror, I can't help but say that I feel like the circumstances have changed. And where my opinion has changed is I don't know, because I don't think anybody can know what the Dallas Cowboys are doing here. And I don't say that in a way that's of the mindset, well, we're not in the room. We're not having those conversations. That's not what I mean. But you can't look at their body of work in terms of where they're at now in the 2024 season. You can't look at everything that they've done so far. And I use the word done incredibly loosely. But you can't look at everything that they've done and accomplished or whatever and have it point to one direction on the compass, right? You can't. There's not. You can't like say, well, they signed Eric Kendricks and they did this and they did that and then whatever. They're clearly heading due east. They're clearly heading due southwest, whatever. It's impossible, because if we were sitting here and the Cowboys had extended Dak Prescott, had extended CeeDee Lamb, had extended Micah Parsons, then we could sit here and we could legitimately, if we wanted to, defend them and say, well, they've spent their money. They feel like they've done that, because all everybody wants to say right now is how the Cowboys view free agency as retaining their own. They have not done that yet, right? And that could still happen, to be very fair. They could still extend before the season begins all the players I mentioned, Dak, CeeDee, and Micah. And by the way, NFL Network's Jane Slater reported on Wednesday that CD seems to be the priority there, and that makes sense. Not in a chaotic way for Dak, but in a way that Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are both probably going to get paid this offseason, so you want to beat those deals. Anyway, the circumstances as I view them, I'm not somebody who, I know a lot of you feel like, oh, they're clearly setting up themselves to be horrible. And I have a hard time disagreeing with that right now, right? Based on the data at hand, the evidence at hand, but they're clearly, this is what people like, are saying, and I'm not mocking this, but people say they're clearly, setting this season up to be nothing, to reset, to whatever. And my argument against that, if you want to do that, fine. If you want to move on from Mike McCarthy, if you want to move on from Dak Prescott after the 2024 season, fine. I may disagree with you. Somebody else may disagree with you. That's okay, right? We can have a disagreement. But if that's the goal, if that's the plan, if you have already decided and you have already determined that you are going to do that, that you are going to let Dak walk, then there is no point in playing Dak this season in my mind. If you're truly that, DOA on the year on purpose in an intentional sense, right? And I don't say that to be dramatic, but I say that to say, if you know he is not a part of your future, why are you not going to see what Trey Lance offers you, especially when you're not going to pick up his fifth-year option? You traded for Trey Lance. You have a literal, investment in finding out what he can offer your team. You have a literal investment in finding out what his chemistry could be like with CeeDee Lamb. And so I don't want the takeaway from this to be, oh man, we should, the Cowboys should bench Dak Prescott. But my point is, if they had at least committed to this idea, that would make sense. Some of us would have disagreed with it. I don't want to speak for the entire fan base, but some of us would have disagreed with it. But at least they would be all, having all of their energy focused in one direction on the compass, right? And to that point, there's a lot of people again offering the opinion. When I tweeted about this, I got a lot of replies. Oh man, they've had Mike McCarthy set up to be the fall guy. And to that I offer, why? Why do they need a fall guy? What is the purpose for having a fall guy? Who are they trying to sell this story to where we need a fall guy? If they were so dissatisfied, if they already understand that they're going to move on, there is no need to just waste our time, waste the players' time, waste a year of, contracts for different players, waste a year of rookie contracts for certain players. There's no need to go through that song and dance, to go through just the motions of it all for what? I mean, in the name of appeasing somebody that it doesn't need to be appeased, if they really feel this way, they should have fired Mike McCarthy. Again, I understand the preposition of it being a lame duck year for Mike McCarthy. He's entering the final year of his contract. They hired Mike Zimmer, obviously on a 1-year deal. Dak Prescott's currently, and we've talked about these things a million times. And so why do it this way? Why purposefully sign up to waste time? That is the most difficult thing that I'm having trouble with in terms of squaring in my mind. Again, I would have disagreed if they decided to move on from Mike McCarthy. In a small sense, I would have been fine with it. But you get my point. Like, if they want to make a change, the reason I would have disagreed with it, to be very clear, is I would like for the next head coach of the team to be on board with whoever the quarterback is. And so the reason I would have advocated for moving on from Mike McCarthy, beyond the fact that the season just ended in a kind of unforgivable way, but that being said, whoever, let's just call it Coach X. Coach X deserves the opportunity to say, I want to work with Dak Prescott. Coach X should not be somebody who you bring in next year and say, hey, Coach X, by the way, last August or whatever, we signed this dude to a NFL record extension. So he's your quarterback for the next handful of years. You're stuck with him. And I don't mean stuck with because I'm a fan of Dak Prescott, right? Coach X should have been hired now to have this season to evaluate Dak Prescott, to say, you know what, and again, you put all your trust in Coach X. You say, all right, Coach X, you like Dak. We're going to do what we can. We're going to keep him. We're going to, he's obviously, he can't be tagged. He can't be traded, whatever. We're going to have to, do everything we can to get a deal done. But you want Dak. We're going to make sure that happens because you're Coach X. And similarly, if Coach X had said, you know what, man, we went at it. We tried a year. It just wasn't worth it. I know we're not going to be able to recoup any sort of capital or investment. We'll get the comp pick and whatever, but let him walk. I want to go somewhere else. Coach X has to be the person to make that decision. You can miss me with this whole like wiping the slate clean, whatever, because you're setting this season up to be a wash, right? Everybody loves the term lame duck. This season is set up to be a wash unless the Cowboys pull off a miracle upon miracles and defy a whole hell of a lot of history that extends beyond just their own franchise. But it is set up to be a wash. Next year is set up to be a wash. You're going about this, I guess, is kind of the sort of meat of my point, in the least efficient way possible. And that pertains to everything that they're doing here. I mean, hell, their first free agent signing was somebody who agreed to terms with a different team. It did not have to be that difficult to land a free agent. And they may very well, goodness, that was difficult. They may very well wind up signing Dak Prescott to an extension. We all understand that that is a possibility, and it may come in August. And I will be happy because I want Dak Prescott to be the quarterback of this team long term. But I will also be upset because this should have been done now. This should have been done now so that you could capitalize on the salary cap space, the relief that it would have provided you. There is no sense relative to that in extending Dak Prescott in August. So you have lost part of the benefit that you could have achieved here. Once again, doing this in the least efficient way possible. And the lack of efficiency, the lack of cohesiveness between the small handful of moves that we have seen this franchise make since the season ended at the hands of the Green Bay Packers, none of them point in the same direction on the compass. And for that reason, the circumstances in my mind suggest that there's no real reason for this season. This season is kind of pointless unless, once again, the players who they placed all of this insane expectation on the shoulders of manage to pull it off and win the Super Bowl. And even then, while we'll be happy that they do that, these players might say, you know what, we won the Super Bowl and we're going to bounce. We're going to peace out because you don't have any power to control or retain us or whatever the case may be. And we'll be happy because the Dallas Cowboys won the Super Bowl. But again, to speak to the point, they would have then won the Super Bowl in perhaps the least efficient way possible. It did not have to be this way. And that is what I think is the most frustrating part about all of this, is they did not have to make this so complicated. I don't know if it's pride. I don't know if it's ego. I don't know if it's incompetence. I don't know if it is a horrible cocktail mixture of all three of those wonderful qualities. But somehow, some way, the Dallas Cowboys stumbled into the 2024 offseason and managed to outdo the incredibly low expectations that we had of them based on a decade's worth of futility with regards to this aspect of roster construction. They have disappointed us once again, year after year after year after year for a decade. The last time the Dallas Cowboys surprised us in free agency, Russell Wilson was a rookie in the NFL. He had just been drafted. I mean, think about the context behind all of that. It was forever ago. I mean, Tyron Smith was entering his second season as a professional when all of that happened. It was so long ago. And again, we all had low expectations. And whether it was spite, whether it was purposeful, whether we are just in our own feelings about it, this offseason, this free agency period has somehow felt worse and somehow felt less efficient than the brokenness that we have seen in the past. And so that, in my mind, has adjusted the circumstances to where you have to be willing, at the very least, in my mind, once again, to tolerate the idea of doing different things because you're not moving in one direction. You have to be operating in perfect harmony always as a professional franchise. You have to have everybody on the same page. Ideally, once again, you have the core foundational elements of your team, your quarterback, your head coach, your GM, your owner, if you want to throw them in, all on the same page. And obviously this isn't the case for the owner, but all on the same contract length. The Cowboys, yes, have Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy on a contract length that is of equal time, given that they're both entering contract years. But like, who does that? Like, in what universe does it end well to have both your head coach and your quarterback, arguably the two most important people relative to your entire operation? What good comes from having them both enter a contract year simultaneously? I can tell you, relative to this team, not any at all, because it happened very recently. 5 years ago in 2019, the Dallas Cowboys allowed Dak Prescott to enter the final year of his rookie contract with the team because they were not forward-thinking enough, and we've discussed that many, many, many times. We don't have to relitigate the actions of the last 1,500 days, but still, the Dallas Cowboys let Dak Prescott enter 2019 in a contract year. They let Jason Garrett enter 2019 in a contract year. They let Jason Garrett do that for a second time in a row because he had done so in 2014. So what happened after the 2019 season? Well, the 2019 year, they started off 3-0, and then they lost 3 games in a row, including to Jamal Adams and his New York Jets, and he had that "how about them Cowboys" line. There was the incredible, just ride of it all, and then they fizzled out at the end, and they moved on from Jason Garrett. So what precedent exists to suggest that this is the most logical way to proceed? None. And I would offer that as I close, I don't think that there is any plan, because that's kind of been my rebuttal to people who say they're clearly tanking, they're clearly doing this, they're clearly doing that. Because to say that they're tanking, and I don't mean to just be silly about this, would imply a level of thought, would imply that somebody with extreme power in this organization sat down with somebody else who has extreme power, or at least extreme influence in the organization, that these two people sat down and of conscious mind laid things out and said, you know what? This is the plan. We're going to do this, and this. We're going to have our 10-step plan. We're going to follow it. We're going to be perfect about it all. And that's how we're going to go about doing it. I don't think that they're capable of doing that, which is why I don't buy that the tank is on. If I buy anything, it's that they're just this bad at this, which is why, once again, all of the arrows are pointing all over the compass in all sorts of different directions. And so that's a frustrating thing. And the Eric Kendricks signing is exciting, but it's not exciting enough to cover all of that. Now we will see if the Cowboys are able to do anything else to cover all of that, and maybe kind of, you get like a magnet and you put it over the compass or whatever it is, and it kind of like recalibrates, and maybe everything kind of starts to point in one direction, and we can decide, hey, we're headed due northeast, or whatever the case ultimately winds up being. If that happens, I will gladly sit here and walk all of this back. But right now, based on literally all of the evidence at hand, it is really difficult to trust that they have any sort of plan, whether it's one that you or I agree or disagree with. So that was tough. It was tough. It's not fun. It's not fun. Really jealous of a lot of teams that are having a lot of fun right now in free agency. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the Blog and the Boys YouTube channel or the Blog and the Boys podcast network, wherever you get your podcasts. We have lots of videos coming out all the time on the YouTube channel. We have lots of shows coming out all the time on the podcast network, because we know that you are obsessed like we are with the Dallas Cowboys. And I don't know why we give them all this love and attention and energy, but we're going to make it through this thing together. We're going to figure out a plan together, one that does point in the same direction on the compass, hopefully so. And we will follow it holding hands as one united fan base, because that's what we do. A reminder that you can, of course, listen to this and watch it. So it's accessible in a number of different ways. It's really just two, but that is a number. So congratulations to technology for making sure that is possible. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads at RJ Ochoa, or on TikTok at rj.ochoa. If you're old school and you would like to send me an email, you can do so at rj.ochoa@sbnation.com. If you are watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below. We'll do our best to get to those. If you're listening on the podcast, specifically Apple Podcasts, and you want to write a question, you can do it in a review, and we'll do our best to get to those and answer those as well here on the show. For now, I bid you adieu. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope the Dallas Cowboys continue to surprise us, and I hope that, to end it the way we always end the podcast, I hope you have the best day ever. I really do. I hope you have the greatest day of all time. You know why? Because you deserve it. We will see you mañana, my friends. As always, go Cowboys, and peace out.